GingerGM.
Hello and welcome to another video. Now there's sometimes occasions in, I think, any job, especially if you enjoy the job. I'm very lucky there, playing chess, doing chess stuff, making videos, where you see something or something you come across really strikes a chord with you, and you suddenly think, wow, that is just amazing. That's just unbelievably beautiful. And I've got to share it with everyone. And that is the case here. That's why I'm going to do a quick video now. Now, I was laying in bed yesterday, about to go to sleep. I was on my phone, checking out things, and I got alerted to a Facebook message on someone's Facebook page. And it was to do with the position in front of us here. And the person who tweeted or Facebook messaged this position was the very strong player from India. Let me just get the tweet up. Surya Ganguly. I hope I pronounced the first name correctly there. Surya Ganguly. And Surya Ganguly, I've played before. Is a very strong Grandmaster from India. He's been the second of Vishwan Anand for, I think, a long time. I mean, I know he's worked with him in the past. I don't know if he still does, but he's a very, very strong player. And this is the position he posted. And, well, let's have a look. I mean, before, I want to try and do this video in a couple of stages, because I think this video can really, it shows something special, but I also want to use it in order to teach you something as well. Now, I want you to have a go at solving this, but it is a tough one. I mean, it took me a good 10 minutes yesterday of thinking, and I'm going to go through my thought processes a bit later on how I solved this puzzle. And it's white to play and win. Now, before we come back to this position, and I'm going to ask you to pause it, have a good think about this position and try to solve it. Before we do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of clues using other positions. And I'm going to tell you what this position really reminded me of, first of all. Well, I'm going to very quickly look at three other positions, and then we're going to come back to this one. So, firstly, it reminded me, even though white's a piece up, of this quite famous position here, where black now played the move queen to b6. And white in this position played a bad move, but the obvious move. And the computer's top choice by a long, long way. Computer's not always right. Try this at home. Put this position on your own computer. In actual fact, the way to win this position is to try and win the a5 pawn here. But in this actual game, white took the queen, obviously very tempting. And after pawn takes b6, the position now becomes a dead draw. Because the pawn structure is so locked, there's no way that white can get through. Even though he's a queen up. For example, h4 was tried. Black played pawn takes h4. Queen to c2. White's one hope in this position is to try and maneuver the queen into the other side of black's position. That's a big, big clue I'm giving away there, hence why I picked this puzzle. You want to try to move your piece from your side into the opponent's side, but now black has a very good way of stopping that. Can you see the way? I may have mentioned this position before. h3, and this stops the queen's route. If I can go h2, I completely lock down the position, and after you take that one, it's very important you don't allow white to play h4. So black now plays h4. Dead draw. Dead draw. There's nothing, no way white can get through. Very amusing position. So that's the first thing it reminded me of. But then as a lesson, it reminded me of a very famous game of Nimzovich's. One of his most famous examples. And this was against Rubinstein. And this is something, again, I've looked at in another video. But here, after pawn takes f5, we now see one of the most famous maneuvers ever in chess. And this is the lesson I want to get across to you. Sometimes when you're in a position where there's nothing tactically urgent going on, so you don't have to deal with threats, or it's not an open tactical crazy position where basically you have time to maneuver. A skill that I often use, which has really helped my positional play, and I think it's something you guys could use, is make sure you have time. It's all about timing first, and I talk about this in my Master Method course, which you can still buy. got to do a little plug now and again, is look at your worst placed piece. Okay, so let's do that here. First of all, let's make sure that black's not doing anything, because if there's any urgent threats against our position, we don't have time to maneuver. But there's not. I mean, black can't really activate any of his pieces. I won't go through them one by one. I want to do this quite quickly. So let's have a look at our pieces. What pieces of white's are good? The bishop is very good, open diagonal. The rook is very good on e2, open file. I mean, a normal move would be rook to e1 here, but that's always going to come. Our queen on f3 is good. It can jump into, jump into action. Our bishop on d2 is not great, but it's okay. It can always stop knight to a5, trying to get rid of our good bishop by exchanging itself. But the one problem piece that Nimzowitsch realised here is the knight on g3. The knight on g3 is rubbish. So what Nimzowitsch, I think, did here, and this is a skill that you can do to improve your practical positional play, is take your worst placed piece, remove it from the board, bye-bye knight, goodbye, take that off the board, imagine it's off the board, and then think of squares where you'd like to place it. So, think in a metaphysical kind of aspect, where would I like to move that knight? And here, well, there's a couple of squares, but one square which is very tempting. I mean, I'm just thinking, where would I move that knight? I would try to maybe think of e6, okay, maybe e5, but also, what about g5? I love that knight on g5, because on g5, I threaten, imagine that knight goes to g5, you have to think in this kind of fairy tale kind of way. I have the knight maybe coming into f7, maybe coming into this square, maybe taking on h7, maybe allowing queen to h5 with checkmate threats. I love that knight on g5. And then what you do, you trace the route back from the g5 square to its original square. How does it get from g3 to g5? Or you can go either way. It doesn't matter which way you go. You have to imagine that position. So what I think Nimzowitsch did is say, okay, well, how do I get my knight from g3 to that square? Well, I can go knight h1, knight f2, knight h3, knight g5. Do I have time to play this? Yes, my opponent's not doing anything. Let's do it. And this is what he did. Knight h1, bishop d7, knight f2, rook e8, rook e1, okay. And eventually, after some exchanges, he gets his knight to h3, and he gets his manoeuvre in. And the threat here of the knight coming to g5 is very strong. Now, bear in mind, I think this all relates to the puzzle. I'm just building up to it and trying to help you improve your chess as well. Let's have a look at an example of Bobby Fischer's, the last one I've got. Now, I'm going to just flip the board. Bobby Fischer is black here against Korchnoi. This is a blitz game. And here he's got a typical King's Indian position. Now, I'm just going to jump forwards okay, let's go through the moves very quickly. Black has managed to block up the queen side so he can concentrate on attacking on the king side. And this is like a typical King's Indian where you want to attack with g4. So he builds up his forces, he keeps attacking, he gets g4 in, white has to take that, his knight comes in, he forces h3, which now is a weakness because now it weakens, like especially the square g3. He moves his other knight in, king g1. He has to move his knight on g4, its attack, bishop e1, and now we have a critical moment of the game. And again, this is the Nimzowitsch effect. This is what the puzzle is all about. How does black improve his attack? And this is quite a rare case because there's so many pieces on the board. But even here, you have a bit of time because white is not doing anything. White's not doing anything. So what Bobby Fischer did here, he looked at his pieces. He said, my bishop is very good. My rook is very good. My queen is okay. My queen can fly in. My bishop is not great, but there's not so much I can do here. My rook on a8, well, okay, I could move it to b8, but that doesn't really help where I'm trying to attack the king side. So then he looked at his knights and he thought, well, okay, my knight here has potential because it can go to h5, but my knight on g6 is not doing great. And then he did the same thing as we just saw Nimzowitsch do, remove that knight from the board. Everyone do that. Where would you place that knight to help your attack here? Do that now. I mean, if you could get it to d4, lovely jubbly, as Del Boy would say, but you can't get it to d4 easily. But where could you move that knight, remove it from the board, put it on any square to attack and try to checkmate your opponent? Well, I think g5. So did Bobby Fischer. If that knight gets to g5, you're threatening the rook, but more importantly, you're threatening to blow white apart by capturing and destroying his pawn structure by taking on h3. So all that Bobby Fischer did here, and you can see you can even do these positional ideas in tactical attacking senses. He tried to get his knight from g6 to g5. Now do that now. Pause if you need to. How do you get the knight from g6 to g5? Very Nimzovich-like. Knight to h8. Boom! The Nimzovich maneuver. Rook d3, knight to f7. Bishop to f3, knight to g5. And now this maneuver just wins the game for Bobby. Queen e2, and now rook g6, king f1, knight takes h3. And look how strong that knight maneuver has been. Pawn takes h3, check. The white king is torn apart, king f2, and now knight g4, check. And white's king is lacking no protection. Bishop takes, and here white resigned, because black's queen is going to come flying in with a winning attack. Again, you can pause these positions, spend a bit more time if you need to. But these are the little clues which I do think relate, they do to me, to the original puzzle. And let's go back there now. So this puzzle is really a combination of those things. It's white to play and win. And when you look at this, you might just think, what on earth you talk about? How on earth can white win this position? Okay, you're a piece up, but how do you ever break through this rock-solid formation? So what you need to do is two things. If we take the examples we used there, first of all, remove the knight from the board and place it on any square where you'd be winning. Okay, well, I'm gonna point some squares. First of all, like that example in the blockade, if we could get the queen on the other side, in this case the knight on the other side, what squares would we put it on? Well, somewhere like f5 should be winning because we're going to win the h6 pawn. You always look for the base of your opponent's pawn structure to attack. So if we can get the knight to f5, that's winning. Okay, where else? Well, if we can get the knight to other squares attacking the pawn, like b7 or here, it's not necessarily winning because our opponent's king can quite easily defend those pawns. The problem is if we get to our knight to f5, there's only one square that black can defend the h6 pawn. He has to put his king on h7, and then, let's just think hypothetically, this is how I was trying to solve this puzzle. I'm going through my stages now. If we move the king, black would be in zugzwang. His king on h7 will have to move away from the defense of the h6 pawn, so knight takes h6 will be easily winning. Our knight can hop back, and then we can push the h6 pawn and win. So the first thing is knight to f5 is winning. But can we get our knight to f5? Let's try to trace back a route from f5. Well, it's not easy, is it? I mean, have a look. How can you get it to f5? And I'm now, okay, what I'm going to do, before I go into the solution of this puzzle, I really recommend you try to solve this yourself. I'll give you a bit of a clue there, but it's such a beautiful puzzle. It took me about 10 minutes. It might take a lot longer, but try to enjoy this yourself. And I'm going to ask you to pause this video in a minute before I go into the solution, because it's really worth trying to solve. It's tough. It's really tough. Post your solutions below in the chat as well. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. But how it's white to play and win. And really, what you've got to do is do this in stages. And I'm going to go through the stages. What is the winning position you're aiming for? Where do you want your king? Where do you want your knight? How do you get that position? So the way to do this is think of the winning position you want with your king and your knight. Think if you can get that position, because obviously in an ideal world, I want my king on g7. But that's really not possible. I can't ever get my king past the pawns. Think of something that might be realistic. Work your way backwards. And it's really very tough, this puzzle. You have to do it in stages. But do now... Really do. Please try to do this yourself. Pause the video now. Okay, well, what I did, I'm going to come to the solution now, is I basically thought of these kind of things where I want my king and my knight. Now, I realised that my knight, one way I might be able to do this, I was looking at my knight behind my pawns first. Is there anywhere my knight can move to behind my pawns which might help me? Because it's going to be, I can't necessarily see how I can easily get it on the other side of my pawns. So this is how I went about it. And I thought, well, you know, any square like c3, e3, g3 is not going to help because my opponent will take my knight and I don't have a pawn break because it's just not going to do anything. He will take the e-pawn and I'm still blockaded. So, okay, I discounted these squares. C3, g3, and this square. But then I realised, hang on a minute. What about if I get my knight, and this is again thinking in this hypothetical way of removing the piece and thinking, this is why you might see top grandmasters when they're looking at their games, they don't always look at the board, they look at the ceiling because they're thinking in hypothetical ways. This is how you can improve your chess massively. I thought, well, hang on a minute, if I move that knight to h4 and then I can try to get it into f5, and then if my opponent takes on h4, what do I need? Well, I need a king on h3. So imagine this. Imagine the stages I'm going through. I need a king on h3 and a knight on h4. Because then if my opponent does not capture my knight can go to f5 and we get the winning position I've already discussed. Now, what happens if my opponent takes the knight? Well, I go king takes pawn, and then I have the pawn break g5, and there's nothing my opponent can do in that position to stop it, as we'll see later on. Even if he's able to go king f6 there, I will go g5 check, pawn takes g5, king to g4, and my opponent is in zugzwang. He has to move his king away, and then I will go king takes g5. Now, I know this is quite complicated. We'll have a look at it in more depth in a minute. So the winning position I want is king on h3, knight on h4. So I thought, okay, this is quite easy. Let's just get the knight to h4, because my king can get to h3. Okay, that's where it gets a bit more difficult, because how do I get the knight to h4? Let's have a look at how the route back from that square, where it can only be g2. It can't be e3, so it can only be e1. Okay, and then it can only be c2. There's no other possibilities. And then originally I thought it can only be a1. And I thought, well, how on earth am I going to get my knight from a2 to a1? And I thought, oh dear. So then I thought, okay, well, this is not the solution then. But I had that idea in mind. So I thought, okay, well, let's try another idea. First of all, if my knight can't get to h4, okay, I can't move my king, so it's got to be some maneuvers from my knight. So where can my knight maneuver to? So then I had a look at the knight's possible routes from this square. And I thought, okay, well, it can only move to c1. It can only move to e2. It can only move to g1. It can only move to h3. So imagine it on h3 now. Then it can only move to f2. And then I thought, well, if it goes to h1, there's no point because it's not going to g3. So it can only move to d1. And then it can only move to b2. And then I thought, then it moves to a4. And I'm getting it on the other side of the pawns. I'm sorry about the long explanation, but I think this puzzle deserves it. I thought, okay, brilliant. This must be winning. I get my knight to a4. But then I thought, okay, well, if I go knight to a4, my opponent's going to meet that with king to c6. So you've got to imagine this. When I play knight to a4, he plays king to c6. And I thought, okay, well, then I have to waste a move. So I have to use this idea of losing a move. I have to move my king somewhere. And then the only place that my opponent's king can stay to guard the c5 pawn is d6. When he moves to d6, my knight can come into b6, and I'm getting into his position. And then I thought, right, so we're imagining now the position, and I'm trying to do this without moving the pieces. We'll go through it in a minute. With my opponent's king on d6, my knight on b6, and I thought I've made progress. So what do I do then? I thought, well, first stage, if I can get my knight to f5, I'll be winning. So then I thought, well, okay, let's go knight to f5. And if I'm able to go either knight to e7, knight to f5, I'm winning. So let's imagine the knight on d5. So I can get this position by the maneuver I said. Knight to b6, knight to d5. So I forced this. This is how I'm working out the puzzle. Where does my opponent's king have to be when the knight's on d5? And I thought, well, it has to be on f7 or e6. Does it not? Because if the king goes somewhere like anywhere on this area of the board, let's immediately just highlight with my knight on d5. So it's very tricky, but my knight, I'm going to put the blue square, is on that square. If my opponent's king is anywhere over here, for example, I'm going to go knight f6 as well, knight g8, knight takes here. So the key thing is, when my knight is on d5, my opponent's king has to control the f6 square and the e7 square. Where's the only two squares you can do that from? The only two squares to control these squares is the e6 and f7. And I spent maybe 5 minutes thinking, how do I win this? And then I came up with, oh, well, where can my knight maneuver? And so you've got to picture this now. Again, pause what I'm saying this if it helps you. because it's a really tough puzzle, but beautiful. And then I thought, right, well, my knight's on d5. He's just going to go king f7, king e6, king f7, king e6. My knight has to be the champion. My king is not doing anything. So then I looked at ideas from my knight on d5 coming over this way. And I thought, well, if my knight goes to c7 and e8, that's not going to help because my opponent's king can always control the e8 square. And then I thought, right, well, what about going to try to go a6? And I thought, well, no. If my knight ever gets to a6, my opponent's king can go d6 and c6, just go backwards and forwards. No. And then I thought, right, well, where else? And I thought, okay, well, what about what squares would be good? And I thought, well, if I can get my knight to b7, I'm thinking hypothetically, from d5, that would be good, because I'll be attacking that pawn and I take away the d7 square. But one thing I know is that I notice, and this is a little rule, if you have a knight on this square and you need to go 2 squares diagonally, it takes a long, long time to get there. It takes 4 moves. And I thought, that's not possible. And then I thought, right, where else can I go? And then I saw c7 as the last possibility. And then b5. And I thought, does it help having my knight on b5? And then I thought, oh my words, beautiful. Because then it connected to the first thing I said about having the knight on h4. Having the knight on h4, what route was it? Well, let's have a look. The knight on c2, I thought could only come from a1, but actually it can come from a3. And then I thought, right, well, now I've solved it. A knight on b5, a king on b2, I can go knight to a3. If my opponent takes the knight, I go king takes knight, and that's a winning king and pawn. And when I get my knight to a3, then I can go knight c2, knight e1, knight g2. And before I play knight to h4, I put my king on h3, knight to h4. I know, it's a bloody complicated puzzle. Let's see it in action now. Okay, so black can't do anything. I hope I explained that in a way that you understand. I've no idea if you haven't. It's Friday morning here. It's all gone a bit mental. So let's have a look. I go king b2 so my knight can move. Black has to wait. King d7. Now my knight moves to try to come to a4. Stage 1. Get the knight to a4. Stage 1. Knight to a4. So let's do it. I'll do this quickly now. We've worked out here. My opponent moves his king. Here. King moves. Here. King moves, here, king moves, here, king moves. My knight is doing stage 1. Here, king moves, here, king moves, here, king moves, here, king moves. I've done stage 1 of the plan. Okay, what's stage 2? Well, stage 2, I would say, is getting the knight to d5, because the knight on d5 forces a black king to stay on these 2 squares, as we've explained. So this is stage 2. Get the knight to where the red square is. Let's do it now. Knight b6. And now I'm threatening knight d5, knight f6, knight g8, winning this pawn. So my opponent's king has to stay on this area of the board, on these, over here somewhere. So he has to play something like king e6, stage 2, knight to this square. Okay, now we're going to see that my opponent only has 3 squares he can move the king to. And now, as I demonstrated before, if the king comes to one of these 2 squares, boom, boom, we go knight to f6, and we play knight to g8, and this is winning because we're going to take the pawn, come back to f5. So, our opponent's king in this position has to just oscillate between f7 and e6. So, king to f7. And now we go to stage 3 of the solution. And stage 3 is to get, and this was the hard stage, this is what I found the hardest, is to get the knight from here to a3. Let's see that in action. So knight c7. Now, let's say king c7, knight to b5, king d7, and now knight to a3. Stage 3 done. Now, first of all, black has 2 options. He takes the knight or doesn't take the knight. If he takes the knight, this is very easily winning. We go king takes, we get a winning king and pawn ending. King here, and now we can, let me just make sure I got this right, we can just go here, b4. And we're either going to take on c5, or at some point, let's say he takes here, I take here, and this is going to be easily winning. The king moves, c5 check, king here, the king has to move backwards, and our king comes and munches everything. Easy to see, that's winning. So after the knight moves to a3, black can't take it, so now black has to wait. So let's see what he does. And now we go to stage 4. Stage 4 is getting our king to a3, our knight to... Sorry, king to h3, knight to h4. So now our knight's here. We can get it there. Okay, let's do it. King here. It's probably best black tries to get it, keep his king over on this side for our breakthrough. So king here, king here, king f6, knight g2, our ideal square. And now we need to get our king to h3. So our king comes king g2, king fc2, king d2, king e2, king f2, king g1, king h2, let's say king here, for example, king h3, king to f6. Okay, hang on a minute. Maybe it's best if black defends with king e6, as I'll show you why. It's slightly more accurate. And now, the final stage, stage 5 of this puzzle. We get the idea, we get the setup we want to go for. Knight to h4. In this position, black has to take the knight. If he doesn't, then we're always going to win with this move. Even if black can meet this with king h7, we have zugzwang, or our knight could come and take these pawns. So he has to take the knight. And now, well, let's say, okay, we did it this way, king f6. When he takes the knight, okay, well, hang a minute. Nope, sorry. He takes the knight. Let's say this is his best defense. He takes the knight. We take. Now, he tries to stop the g5 break by going king to f6. But now we have g5 anyway, check. And this is another beautiful winning idea. Pawn takes king g4. It's now zugzwang. He has to move his king away. And when the king moves away, we take here. And now this is easily winning. The king moves. And now we can just go munching all of these lovely pawns. So that is actually... Let me just have a look at the analysis there. And let's have a look. That is the analysis that was going through my mind when I was solving this. It's actually a I would say a 31 move win. A 31 move win. It's a 31 move puzzle, this one. You have to see 31 moves ahead, at least, to be able to solve this. So if anyone asks me now, how many moves do you see ahead? I can say 31. 31, mofo. 31, mofo. But the beautiful thing is, and the reason this puzzle works is it's a pure starting position. This is one thing I love this puzzle. It's so pure. There's only a knight and a king you can move. And it just shows you how rich chess is. With only 2 pieces you can move. There's so much going on. And the way to solve this is to think in this positional, hypothetical, abstract way. Where do you want to move the knight to? How do you achieve that? Can you achieve it? And you've got to think in this positional way. And I think solving this puzzle shows how grandmasters think when they're planning in the middle game and when they're planning positional maneuvers, when they're trying to improve their pieces. This is a pure case because black has no counterplay. In a game situation, it's even more complicated than this because you have to deal with your opponent's counterplay in most situations. But what a beautiful, beautiful puzzle. And I thoroughly enjoyed solving that one last night. And I have to thank Ganguly for posting it up. So Surya Ganguly, thank you so much for giving me that little bit of joy with that puzzle. And as you can see, you know, I don't need to go to an art gallery to see a piece of art today. I just went on Twitter and I saw a chess position, and how rich was that? And there you go, my little, well, it's quite a long explanation. I don't know how long this video is, but I think I had to do it this long, and maybe it's too long for most to follow, but I've got to do it that way because it's such a beautiful thing to explain. And okay, a little bit different there, but I hope you enjoyed that because I certainly did. Thanks, and goodbye for now.